I'm Emily Rooney. It's a perennial problem around these parts. Every time a big storm comes through, homeowners in places like Plum Island and Scituate face the threat of flooding. But it isn't just coastal properties at risk. Homes near lakes and rivers are also in harm's way, and insuring them is costly. As part of this week's in-depth focus report, WGBH News reporter Ibby Caputo sat down with a young family struggling to keep their heads above water as new insurance rates take effect.
When Jeff and Carrie Paiva found this 3-bedroom home in Andover, they thought they were buying into the American dream.
The reason we purchased this house is because Andover is such a great town. They have wonderful schools, and we know that we would like our son to be raised here.
An added charm was living just down the street from the Shawshene River, or so they thought.
Now we might be, for lack of a better word, underwater and struggling to get by.
That's because the Paivas just saw the cost of their flood insurance go up by $250 a month.
That's a big hit when you have a new baby and daycare and everything else.
The Paivas are not alone. Homeowners across the country who live near water bodies, big and small, are seeing similar rate hikes. Congress, which created the National Flood Insurance Program, ended rate subsidies in 2012.
They gave no information on how that was happening, what the consequences would be. They just said it's going to go into effect when your policy comes renewed.
At the same time, FEMA, which administers the flood program, redrew the maps that estimate the flood risk for individual homes like the Paivas. And the new map says their house is at a much higher risk of loss if the Shawshene floods.
If you look at a FEMA flood map, it looks like my 4-month-old drew it.
It's so difficult to read.
It looks like it's drawn with crayons. It was done very, very ineffectively.
And haphazardly.
They may have a point, says hydrologic engineer Peter Burrill.
Yeah, I'd be knocking on FEMA's door.
When Burrill looked at the changes to the Paiva's flood map, he questioned whether FEMA considered decades of new data.
From what I can see and what I can read, I'm not sure why they didn't use the stream flow information that's available on the Shawshene that has 50 years, almost 50 years of record.
FEMA could not confirm whether the agency used all available data, but engineer Carrie Bogdan says the research behind the maps is sound.
There's actually 6 steps of quality review they go through.
But Bogdan says homeowners who think the maps have errors can challenge them.
They would have to provide scientific or technical data that refuted our data. So that would mean, hiring an engineer and undertaking doing the modeling.
That would cost as much as $20,000, much more than the Paivas have to spend.
For us personally, I feel like we will have a very difficult time with a new baby and this extra expense on our mortgage to even make it through 2014.
For now, though, they have little choice.
And Emily, there's actually a push in Congress right now to delay the full implementation of this law that ends subsidies. But homeowners like the Paivas are already feeling the effects.
All right, Ibby, thanks for that. All right, well, my next guest is working to block the flood insurance hikes from taking effect. Bob Hedlund is a Republican state senator who represents parts of the South Shore. Welcome back to Greater Boston. Well, as a state official, what recourse do you have, since this is a federal law?
Right, you're right. It is a federal issue, but of course, when these rate increases hit our constituents, those of us who represent many of the impacted people received a lot of phone calls and certainly got the attention of us. We've been working to get the attention of folks in Congress. We've seen a little movement now, as was indicated in the introduction package, where the Senate actually voted a cloture vote last night to advance this in the Senate, to delay implementation.
Did people like the Paivas and did the constituents you're hearing from have no notice, or were they notified by their insurance companies?
This really it blindsided, I think, members of Congress even. It passed as part of a larger piece of legislation. There were only 11 votes against it. The entire Mass delegation voted for this initially, and Emily left it up to FEMA to fine-tune ways in which they're going to try to make themselves more solvent. As was indicated, they're $24 billion in debt to the U.S. Treasury under this program, the NFIP. And I think what FEMA did was just cast a bigger net and try to get more people into the program paying premiums to come up with that money. And unfortunately, they've whacked people who I don't think they should be whacking people who have never had claims. You look at some of the data that was used, some of the modeling, some of the assumptions to come up with the new maps, fatally flawed, We could do an entire show about those flaws.
I know, but they're saying it's all based on science and the whole issue of global warming, and that people and the science for the future too, that more and more areas are going to be flooded just by the melting of the ice caps, and that catastrophic flooding has occurred in a number of places. There's no such thing as a 100-year storm anymore. It's the perennial 10-year storm or the 20-year storm, and that all these payouts have added up to the point where the government can't subsidize.
If you're going to use an analogy and talk about 100-year storms, really what the modeling here did was consider a 1,000-year storm or a million-year storm. I mean, it goes way beyond any potential that exists, even when you factor in assumptions made under global warming and rising sea levels. That's part of the problem here. And part of what they're trying to do now in Congress is get FEMA to address the issue of affordability, which was part of the mission when they were given this charge, which clearly they failed to do. When you have someone like I have, a constituent of mine, who has seen a premium go from something like $3,600 a year to $68,000 a year for a $250,000 maximum policy. Clearly, there's a problem here in regards to affordability.
Yeah. Well, so are they going to delay it? Because these people are already getting their bills, and it comes up on renewal, which makes sense. So when your policy comes up, some people's probably came up last year. Can they retroactively delay this thing?
Well, just one further point. Now, FEMA, we know owes, under this program, the NFIP owes the U.S. Treasury $24 billion. Clearly, there's a problem. Now, part of that is a result of mismanagement by FEMA of Hurricane Sandy and of especially Hurricane Katrina. We've seen General Accounting Office studies that confirm this. So they're now trying to balance their books on the backs of people who have never filed claims and who probably will not see claims. So Congress now is trying to force FEMA into looking at the issue of affordability. What this delay will do, and bear in mind, only 1% of claims account for 33% of claims paid out, dollars paid out in claims. Granted, there are buildings, there are structures built in areas that they shouldn't be built. But the fact is, now we're going to try to balance this on the backs of homeowners in places that are not impacted. And the affordability issue under this bill that's kicking around Congress now, they will exempt vacation homes from the delay. They will exempt people who have multiple claims. We're trying to get to those people that are not impacting the system.
All right, good issue. Senator Bob Hedlund.
And we hope the House takes it up. Senate moved forward last night, but there's questions as to whether or not the House will advance this.
Bob Hedlund, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.